Hey guys, welcome back to Fright Flicks. This is Mike, and we are doing the Killer Theories for Slasher, Chiller TV Slasher, Episode 4. We're having to record these separately this time, so I'm going to go ahead and set it up a little bit and then turn it over to Nate. What's kind of funny is I just got an email from Nate as he was sending me his side of it, and he's like, "Oh, I really love this episode." A little bit of spoilers ahead for that. He's like, "Oh, I really love this episode." And I'm like, "That's weird. Really didn't like this episode." So actually, I'm not going to listen to his side of it until I've edited it together and it's posted and everything, just to see, not only our killer theories, but our reviews where the discrepancy was in there. So I'm actually pretty excited to hear his review, so let's go ahead and get right to it. This is Nate's review of Slasher Episode 4.
Episode 4 of Slasher is entitled, As Water is Corrupted Unless It Moves. It's actually a good title because this episode moved, for me, more than any other episode had. And it's not because it was like super bombastic or a ton happened. It just felt, forgive the pun, but it felt better executed than the previous episodes. We're continuing all our ongoing storylines here. Sarah is still doing her personal investigation into the identity of the executioner, which is running parallel not only to the investigation of the police, but also her husband, Dylan, the journalist, who ends up doing a story on her, and through a little bit of duplicity ends up wrangling an interview with the incarcerated Brad Dourif, Tom Winston. That all moves along pretty well. We actually start off with a pretty decent murder. Character was introduced last week as a serious creepo. We start off with him being stalked through the woods and herded, Wolf Creek style, into a pit, into a trap. And once he falls and breaks his leg, the executioner, old condom head, shows up and dumps a bunch of snakes all over him. Death by snake pit, which is apparently the traditional punishment for sloth. So, one of the things I liked about this episode was that part of it was the investigation of trying to figure out why this man was killed for this sin. It's interesting. Last week it dealt with Sarah's grandmother and why she was being targeted by the executioner. And this is a little bit of a, not a whodunit, but a why-done-it. What did this guy do? And we find out that he is punished for sloth for ignoring a drunk 15-year-old girl on the night that she ended up disappearing. He's an ambulance driver, so had he merely done his job, she might have been saved that night. But he chose to go off shift, go home. The girl was never seen again. It was an interesting reveal. It was an interesting, little bit of backstory. It also feels like it's going to be feeding into a couple of other ongoing subplots. So I'm finally starting to get the feeling that things are going to come together to some degree. Meanwhile, in jail, Tom Winston manipulates Dylan to get some of Sarah's hair, which he then hands off to the priest, who the executioner, I'm not going to say that's Tom Winston because I'm not convinced that it is, but who the executioner attacked 30 years ago and let him live. Now he's the local religious leader. Winston gives some of her hair to him with the unspoken reasoning of having it DNA tested. Of course, we've got to throw the father-daughter thing into the mix. It's been there the whole time. Glad to see they're sort of pulling the trigger, moving ahead with it. The pace of this show was good. It wasn't too fast because we're still in the middle stretch of this 8-episode limited series. They're not going too fast, but we did start off with a good murder. We had several different storylines that all moved very well, and they didn't linger on any one of them long enough for it to, slow down, get boring. And then this is what really set this episode apart for me. This has been my biggest criticism of the show so far, is they don't know how to end an episode. The episodes just sort of stop. Well, this one had a good, solid intro, a good, solid building middle portion, and for the first time it had a really good ending. Like, for me, it was probably my favorite moment the show has done so far. It just gave you the scenario in a very well shot scene to set up how June Henry, Cam's wife, has been set up to be murdered. Looks like she's going to be chewed up by rats. Really disturbing, and just a great way to kick off an episode. For the first time, this show went to closing credits, and I was like, sweet, I cannot wait until next week. Maybe a whole shit ton of events didn't go down this episode, but I gotta give them major props for good directing, because it just felt crisp, everything came off well, everything seemed to move quickly. It was definitely the best episode of Slasher that they've done so far. Rate everything on a scale of 1 to 10 here. I gave the pilot a 7 out of 10. Maybe that was a little generous, but if that one was a 7 out of 10, this one is an 8 out of 10. I'm hoping the show is hitting its stride now, and it's going to just keep getting better every week. You know what? Even if it doesn't, if it can maintain this quality, I'm going to be happy with it.
Okay, and like I said, I didn't really listen to that, so hopefully this is going to match up a little bit, and, even if it's redundant, it'll be interesting, because I don't know what he said. He sent me a little something that said it was the most professional episode, and, I guess, I can see that. The thing that really, calls to mind when you say professional is really their camera work. Their camera work, their locations, it's all just, oh my goodness, it's so beautiful. I don't know if they have a second unit working for them. I would have to check the credits, but just their landscape shots and their transition shots are just always so beautiful. And then in this episode particularly, towards the end, they have this helicopter shot over a field of wheat and stuff. It always looks so damn good. Choices of lenses. It's just very, very slick looking. Sound design is always good. And then, of course, we have the actors, who are always spot on. Not necessarily in this episode, but I do not blame them for that in this episode. The best that I can kind of sum up what was wrong with me for this particular episode is just that everything felt false. Everything felt off. Everything was a little bit awkward. And again, I don't throw that at the actors. We've already seen 3 episodes, because this one mostly has everybody who's been in the other ones. And we've seen them. They are good all around. Good actors. Very good all around. And this one, I think it has to do with the professional look that Nate was talking about. Let alone the fact that the writing, when you write something like this that's very, in a way, if you get what I mean, Stephen King's Small Town, there's got to be all the drama in the small town and stuff, and that's very easy to go into soap opera, and stuff like that, which the show is mostly avoided, but I think it really fell into those pratfalls this time, where there was a lot of just and I know you got to have drama. I'm not talking about that. You guys know what I'm talking about. We got some writers who listen to this, and I like I said, I didn't listen to Nate's, but he had to have pointed some of this out too, that it's just it's in the way that you handle it in the dialogue. There was a lot of really awkward exchanges that you see made fun of on South Park, no, you can't go to your own home to save your wife who's about to die. Like, why is the Vaughn telling you you're too close to this? You know, there was a lot, and I really didn't like that scene between Dylan and his boss and the other lady. Like, they did not. The three actors didn't really seem like they were meshing well at all, and Dylan actually, I love Dylan. I really do, and maybe that's one of the things that rubbed me wrong about this episode is that Dylan's starting to act like an asshole, and I'm just like, no, he's fucking awesome. He would never do shit like this, but you know, integrity, and we learned that he was sending notes to somebody. But I'll get to some of that in Killer Theories. But anyway, poor Dylan. They try, like I said, all the actors, they really do try, but they get saddled with stuff like I love it. This line killed me, where he's like, the executioner, he's terrorizing this town. He's playing judge, jury, and hangman. Like, I mean, he says it convincingly enough, but what an awkward line. Like, you can tell the writer is writing that and was like, he got to that cliche, and then he was like, oh shit, well, I can't say the executioner is acting like that, and then just didn't bother to fucking like delete that line or find something. But poor fucking Dylan, and he got strapped with it. Anyway, so it was just mostly things like that, and my theory on why that kind of happened, maybe just in this episode, is that yeah, it's so professional looking. Like, the cameras are so good, and they're always framed up correctly. They're always getting really, like, if you watch scenes, usually, you know, low budget movies and TV, for the most part, you get 3-point coverage, which is, if you notice and break down each shot, usually get your wide, and then you get close-ups, mediums on people, which are really punch-ins, so we're talking about setups and stuff. But this show will give you like more film coverage, which is like 5 to 6 to 7, you know, multiple not establishing shots, but wide, you know, shots to reestablish the space. Anyway, stuff like that. And so what I think happens is, in the attempt, they pull it off in spades. But to make the show look as good as they do, it's either less takes for the actors, or the actors get rushed through it, or maybe it was the editor. I need to check. Maybe it was a new editor this time, and they were using not the greatest takes. I just personally feel that the actors were kind of like left out in the wind on this episode to like have some pretty awkward exchanges. But again, maybe that's just me. I don't know. So one of the things, is that a killer theory? Maybe that's a killer theory. I'm going to go ahead and put that off. Let's see. Going over my notes of... No, I mean, that's pretty much it. Like, I mean, other than that, you know, it's episode 4. If I had another complaint, it's just that we're halfway through it. Usually when you watch anything, halfway through a movie, a TV series, or a season, halfway through it realigns and becomes something new. That's just like general pacing stuff. And being that this is 8 episodes, by the end of the 4th episode, it really should have like upped itself to this grand new level. And I think its new level that it introduced was getting more into the girl who got kidnapped. But they didn't really like whatever that too much. But otherwise, whatever. It's just... I mean, this one guy's writing every episode, so as long as he gets back on track with the next one, I'm fine. You know, I like this show. It's all good. So let me get into my killer theories now. Actually, I got to turn it over to Nate. He's going to do his killer theories, then come back to me. I'll do mine. So take it away, Nate, on your killer theories.
Now it is time for killer theories. I believe Mike's going to kick us off with those. Okay, so my killer theory is, I guess I'm getting tired of repeating myself. You're probably getting tired of listening to me, but I'm sticking with my initial gut reaction pick. Every single week, I stick with my first pick, who is Police Officer Cam Henry. And it's not like there's a building amount of evidence against him, but nothing has happened so far that has ruled him out. And if if anything, one thing that I learned from this episode, unless they're going to cheat on it, is that the executioner is a male. Old Condom Head, whoever is wearing that, is male. At least for the scene where June Henry was attacked in the church, because the executioner was taller and larger and stronger than her and was able to pick her up and carry her out of the church. Could a woman do that? Of course a woman can do that. But it would have to be a woman of a somewhat large stature. And this is a TV show. There aren't a bunch of big gals running around. That's not how they do TV. So they can always cheat and just say, oh yeah, it's whoever we want that's under there. But I would say that it is definitely male, which, all right, that bolsters Cam. His whereabouts are unaccounted for during a couple of key moments. That always bodes in his favor. And big thing is they started casting a real strong suspicion against Sarah's husband, Dylan. So that's great, because if they were starting to overtly cast suspicion on Cam now, then I would know it isn't him, because that's how these things work. If anything, he's being presented as something of an anomaly in the world of slasher films, which is a competent police officer. He's doing the grunt work. He's plowing through all this mind-numbing evidence, trying to find the one clue. So it's kind of cool. They're building him up to be an actual good cop, while now they're building suspicion against Dylan. Sticking with Cam Henry, and I will be sticking with that until, I guess, he turns up dead. All right, come back and join us next week for a review of episode 5 of Slasher. This one is called Ill-Gotten Gains. I don't know anything about it, but for the first time, I am super psyched. 8 out of 10 this week. Check out this show. It's an original series on Chiller TV. I think it's worth your while. Get at me on social media. I'm at NateFlix on Twitter or Facebook, or just respond to this video if you got something to say, and I will respond.
All right, right on. And I didn't listen to that either. I wouldn't have listened to that one way or the other, because I kind of like ours to be separate, so even I can listen and see if we picked up on the same things or whatever. So some of the stuff is at the very beginning, we see the grandmother on the bridge, and in the beginning of this episode, we see that she was pregnant. I don't think we saw that any other time. So she was pregnant at the time she threw the brick. I was starting to think like who the father could be. It's probably that mayor dude. But then I was like, I don't know. I'm gonna have to look back into that. But it's very interesting that she was pregnant. I don't think that that's information we had before. So then one of the big things is that one of the snakes, the brown mouthed something, I don't even remember. I fucking hate snakes. I don't know anything about them. But anyway, he says it's imported from Australia. So I'm going to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure that Sarah gets stuff imported, and I can only assume Robin has said something, I think, in one of the last episodes, is like, oh, well, my husband handled this, and I, got all this other blah, blah, blah. But I got to go back and look for clues about who gets stuff imported, but I don't know. That's a little bit silly too, but I mean, I'll let it go, especially once we find out who the executioner is, that the executioner is importing snakes to kill people now, and he's shooting at people. Whatever, it's all good. So that's one thing. Make sure to keep that in mind. Then one thing that somebody pointed out online, and in our comments section, always read our comments. We're going back and forth with other killer theories that we come up with during the week and stuff, so always read the comments. But in last week's comments, somebody brought up the idea that has anyone really ever seen the executioner other than Sarah? And I was like, whoa, yeah. After thinking about it, I was like, yeah, Robin and that fat fry cook saw him in the alley. And then I was thinking, in this episode, I'm pretty sure everybody's like come to the conclusion that the executioner is real, and they're not doing the whole like, Sarah it, not the executioner type thing. So why didn't Robin like ever tell anybody that he was like, yeah, duh, it's the executioner, I fucking saw him? Or where's the fry cook who's being like, I'm not going back to work anymore because there's a mass serial killer who hangs out in my back alley when I try and take the trash out. But whatever, it's just, I guess now it's out in the open, so all's forgiven. But Robin, speaking of him, is he's starting to get, and that's one thing I really did like about this episode. And again, it's that give and take of like the camera versus the acting. And the writer is doing a really good job of the mystery, the whodunit, the killer theory stuff. I still think, of course, that it's 100% Sarah, but he's doing a very good job that he casts like shade on every single character, like convincingly throughout this whole episode. So that was really good. But Robin specifically in this episode, he's starting to take on the role of the final girl's best friend and helper and confidant type thing, which if you've seen enough slashers and enough whodunits, right? Think about it. Usually that character ends up being the killer reveal. Be like, you were helping me. No, you were leading me the whole time. Think about it. I'm not going to give you any examples because I don't want to ruin those movies, but I'm pretty sure we've all seen MTV Scream, so just think about that one. But then, being that it's Robin, brings up the idea that, well, there would at least need to be two killers. And I don't even want to get into that, truthfully. We pick one killer per episode. We want you guys to pick one killer per episode. And if we start doing that, we're like, oh, it could be two. Well, then it could be three, or it could be four, it could be five. I mean, we've done this on Scream Queens. We had this whole theory. Nate was a big fan of it, and I'll go ahead and say that was always my idea for a slasher, that basically everybody is the killer. So we're not even going to get into that. I'm just going to pretend that it's one person. If it ends up being two, of course it's probably going to be two. Ugh, I'm just so sick of seeing that by now. But anyway, so just going for one. It couldn't be Robin, but if there's two, Robin could definitely be in on it. And so, again, we could go over all of the like details of who was who and where, and that Trent was revealed to be the redneck guy. He was revealed to be Verna McBride's, so the McBrides are coming into this thing a bit more. But seriously, like, I could do that, but every single character had the finger pointed at them this episode, so I'm not even going to do that. So I'm just going to stick to my Sarah thing. One, Sarah, again, always around for the right moments to be. She was with Cam. She was with Cam, but he left, and she let him leave, so she was ready to go get him. The other thing that points to her more specifically is the idea that the same thing that happened to the grandmother happened in this episode, where not only did June admit to her sins before she died, she pushes her to admit her sins. She turns to her and she's like, are you sure you and Trent weren't just work friends? And she's like, and that's when she breaks down and tells her and everything. I don't know. She's just, and, well, whatever. Obviously, I think she's suspicious. But anyway, there's the one part where she's getting interviewed, and either that plays into the whole thing where she's trying to call the executioner a coward. We've seen this before. Call him a coward so he comes out, to get her type thing. Comes out of the shadows to come get her. Makes Tom Winston mad. We don't know what it did to the executioner, whatever. I say it's Sarah, so what I say she was actually doing there was, trying to, cast the whatever off of her. But at the same time, I think she was giving her reasons for doing it. Because she talks about, you think about these things happen to you, and then you think about it long enough, and this darkness encroaches, and you imagine the deaths, and da-da-da-da-da-da. Which, then it shows all the deaths, which I would have said, oh, that was her because she was actually there for all of them. However, it shows her mom getting killed, which obviously, she wasn't technically, she's technically there for that, but you know what I mean. Anyway, so she says, oh, and it just makes you start hating and blah, blah, blah. And then, all you want is revenge. So maybe that's her telling, her motivation. Maybe the whole thing is like revenge for her parents dying. We will have to see. But again, I totally think it's Sarah. It always hooks up 100%. Sarah's gets my bet. The old lady wasn't in this episode, but the killer doesn't have to be in every episode. And if I were to pick a secondary, I'm not going to pick a secondary. Fuck it. Nope. I'm going all in on Sarah. So that is my killer theory, Sarah, and I am giving the episode as a whole a 5, because it's so damn good in the stuff that's good, and it's so damn bad in the stuff that it fumbles. So it gets a 5 out of 10. Definitely my least favorite thus far. Wouldn't have stopped me if I weren't already reviewing them from watching the rest of them, but can't be perfect all the time. Alright guys, so this was Mike, and we will see you next week for more slasher and slasher killer theories. Later on, guys.